The search for meaning is one of the most universal and paradoxically most solitary experiences of the human condition. All of us, at some point in life, look up at the starry sky or into the bathroom mirror and ask the question that has echoed through the centuries. Why am I here? What's the purpose of all this? What nobody tells us is that this sacred search has a dark side, a barren territory we must cross before finding any real answer. It's as if the universe were saying, "You want to know the meaning of life? First, prove you can withstand the emptiness of having no answer at all." Alan Watts called this the wisdom of insecurity, that terrible and liberating moment when we realize that our thirst for meaning might become exactly what prevents us from finding it. Because there's something cruel about the search for meaning. The more desperately we search, the more lost we become. And it's in this paradox that our journey truly begins. But something curious happens when we start looking for life's meaning. The more we search, the more lost we feel. It's like trying to catch your own shadow. The harder you chase it, the more it runs away from you. This is one of the first traps we encounter on the spiritual path. Imagine a person dying of thirst in the desert. They see mirages everywhere, run toward each one, but always find only hot sand. The problem isn't the thirst. It's real and valid. The problem is the desperate chase, the belief that water is always just ahead, always out of reach. The search for meaning can become exactly that, an endless race toward mirages. We read books, take courses, follow gurus, try spiritual practices, and still the emptiness persists. Why? Because we've turned the search into an obsession, into an escape from the present moment where meaning actually lives. The truth is that meaning isn't hidden somewhere distant waiting to be discovered. It's here, now, in this exact moment when you breathe, think, and exist. But our restless mind can't accept something so simple. We prefer the complexity of the search to the simplicity of presence. And so, we keep chasing our own shadow, until the day we get tired and stop. Only then do we realize it was always there, stuck to our feet. Alan Watts used to say this is like trying to bite your own teeth, impossible by definition. You can't step outside yourself to observe yourself, just as you can't escape the present moment to find the present moment. The search for meaning becomes absurd when we realize that the seeker and what is sought are the same thing. The problem isn't the absence of meaning, it's the belief that it's somewhere else. But who is this self that searches for meaning? When we stop to observe carefully, we discover something disturbing. Maybe this self is just an illusion, a collection of memories, fears, and desires that pretended to be a real person throughout our entire life. It's like discovering that the hero of our story never truly existed. Alan Watts described this brilliantly. We're like waves in the ocean that forgot they are water. We spend our whole lives believing we're separate entities, fighting to survive and find meaning, when actually we're temporary expressions of something much larger. The wave doesn't need to search for the ocean. It already is the ocean. This discovery doesn't come as a gentle, illuminated revelation. It arrives like an existential earthquake. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the person in the mirror is a stranger, that your own memories seem to belong to someone else, that even your most intimate thoughts sound false and borrowed. This happens because we start to see through the mask of personality. We realize that what we called self was actually a character created to survive in the world, a role we played so well that we forgot it was just theater. And when this perception arises, it's scary. It's like discovering that the clothes we've worn for years aren't our skin. We can take them off, change them, live without them. Or like an actor who spent so much time playing the same character that they forgot how they were before putting on the costume. When they finally remove the outfit in the dressing room, they no longer recognize the face in the mirror. Who are we when we're nobody in particular? What remains when all the labels, all the titles, all the stories we tell about ourselves dissolve? What remains is something more fundamental than any identity. Pure consciousness that observes, that is present, that simply is. But to reach it, we need to cross this uncomfortable territory where we discover we never were who we thought we were. And then we encounter the void. Not that romantic emptiness of poems, but the arid, cold void that stares back at us when we ask, what's the meaning of all this? A void that doesn't give us easy answers, that doesn't comfort us with empty promises. A void that simply exists and forces us to exist alongside it. This void is a cruel teacher, but perhaps the most honest one we'll encounter. It doesn't sell us false hopes, doesn't distract us with temporary consolations. It shows us the naked, raw reality, that maybe there isn't a ready-made meaning, wrapped up and delivered on a silver platter, that maybe we need to create it ourselves, from nothing. At first, this seems like a sentence of spiritual death. How can we live without a given purpose, without a clear direction, without the certainty that we're on the right path? It's like being thrown into an ocean without a compass, without a map, without even knowing where the nearest shore is. The despair we feel is real and valid. But there's profound wisdom hidden in this experience. The void teaches us something no self-help book can teach, that we're stronger than we imagined, that we can create beauty and meaning even when starting from nothing, that our capacity to love, to care, to find moments of joy doesn't depend on a cosmic guarantee that everything makes sense. We're capable of being human even, or especially, in the face of absolute uncertainty. Our culture teaches us that everyone should have a purpose, a mission, a reason for being that gets us out of bed every morning. Find your purpose and you'll be happy, say the books. But what if this obsessive search for purpose becomes itself a prison? What if the question, "What's my purpose?" is the wrong question? There are people who spend decades in anguish because they can't identify their life mission. They look at others who seem to have clarity about their path and feel like failures, lost, incomplete, as if it were mandatory to have an answer to the question, "Why am I here?" But observe nature around us. Does the tree have a purpose? Does the cat sleeping in the sun have a mission? Is the river flowing to the sea fulfilling its destiny, or simply being what it is? Maybe purpose is a human invention, an attempt to give order to something that's naturally fluid and spontaneous. When we stop desperately searching for our purpose, something interesting happens. We begin to live, not to fulfill a mission, not to satisfy a cosmic need for meaning, but simply because we're alive and life pulses through us. We discover that we can find joy in small things, that we can care about people and causes not because it's our purpose, but because it's our human nature to care. Freedom lies in living without needing to justify our existence. We all carry stories about who we are. I'm someone who's always been strong. I'm a sensitive person. I'm someone who never gives up. These narratives give us a sense of continuity, of coherent identity. But sometimes, life puts us in situations where these stories simply don't work anymore. And when they collapse, it's like losing our footing. Imagine discovering that the strong person can also be fragile, that the sensitive person can also be insensitive, that the one who never gives up sometimes needs to give up to survive. It's disconcerting to realize we're much more complex and contradictory than our personal stories allow us to be. The collapse of these narratives isn't a failure, it's a liberation. For years, we've lived trying to be consistent with a story about ourselves that might have been created when we were 5 years old. We force ourselves to fit into molds that have become too small, to maintain masks that have become too heavy. When these stories fall apart, we're temporarily lost. We no longer know who we are, how to act, what to expect from ourselves. But this not knowing is the beginning of true freedom. We can begin to discover ourselves anew, without the limitations of old narratives. We can be contradictory, complex, constantly changing. We can be truly human, instead of characters in a story we invented about ourselves. There's a terrible moment in the journey of self-knowledge when we realize we're completely free. Not the romantic freedom of movies, but the crushing freedom of discovering that nobody, not God, not fate, not circumstances, is going to decide for us how to live our life. We're the only ones responsible for choosing who to be each moment. This realization can be more frightening than any prison. At least in prison we know where the walls are, what the rules are, what to expect. In absolute freedom, we wake up every day facing infinite possibilities, and this infinity can be paralyzing. What if I choose wrong, we ask? What if I waste my life? It's like standing before a blank canvas with all the colors in the world available, but not knowing what to paint. The abundance of options can be more paralyzing than the lack of them. Or like having access to an infinite library, but not knowing which book to choose first. Total freedom can generate anxiety that limitation never created. The total responsibility for our existence is a weight many prefer not to carry. It's more comfortable to believe we're following a divine plan, fulfilling our destiny, or that we're victims of circumstances. Anything rather than accept that we're the architects of our own life, that every thought, every emotion, every action is our choice. But there's profound beauty in this frightening responsibility. It means we can reinvent ourselves at any moment. It means we're not condemned by our past, nor limited by our circumstances. It means life is a work of art, and we're simultaneously the artist, the paint, and the canvas. The anguish of freedom is also the infinite possibility of creation. There's a loneliness that no companionship can cure, no connection can fill. It's the existential loneliness of realizing that in the end, each of us is alone inside our own consciousness. We can share words, gestures, intimate moments, but we can never truly cross the barrier that separates one mind from another. This discovery can be devastating. We realize that no matter how much someone loves us, no matter how close we are, they'll never be able to experience the world exactly as we experience it. They'll never truly know what it's like to be us, and we'll never truly know what it's like to be someone else. Often, we try to escape this loneliness through intense relationships, seeking an impossible fusion with the other. Or we lose ourselves in crowds, in frantic activities, in anything that distracts us from the reality that we are, ultimately, alone with ourselves. But when we finally accept this fundamental loneliness, something magical happens. We stop demanding that others fill a void only we can fill. We stop projecting impossible expectations onto relationships. And paradoxically, only then can we truly connect with other people, not to escape our loneliness, but to share the human experience of being alive and conscious in this mystery we call existence. When we begin the spiritual journey, there's a voracious hunger for answers. We devour self-help books, follow gurus, collect inspirational quotes. Everything happens for a reason. The universe conspires in your favor. You attract what you think about. These phrases sound like profound truths when we're desperate for meaning. But as we deepen our search, these answers begin to seem shallow, inadequate to explain the real complexity of human existence. Where's the divine plan when a child dies of cancer? How does the universe conspire in favor of someone born into extreme poverty? Why do some people, even thinking positively, continue to suffer? The disenchantment with these easy answers can be painful. It's like growing up and discovering Santa Claus doesn't exist. We lose the innocence of believing there's a simple formula for happiness, a foolproof recipe for success, a comforting explanation for all suffering. But this disenchantment is necessary. It frees us from the need to pretend we understand mysteries that are greater than our comprehension. It allows us to embrace uncertainty, live with unanswered questions, find peace even when we can't explain why things are the way they are. We discover it's possible to live a rich and meaningful life even without having all the answers. In fact, it's exactly the acceptance of not knowing that opens us to true wisdom. For years, we learn about meditation, about observing our thoughts, about being the silent witness of our inner experience. We develop an observer self that supposedly is separate from and above everything it observes. But then something unexpected happens. This observer also disappears. It's a disconcerting moment. If there's no longer anyone observing, who is experiencing this moment? If there's no longer a central self controlling the experience, what's happening? It's as if the very ground of spiritual identity we built collapses under our feet. This is perhaps the deepest fear of those seeking awakening. What if, in the process of transcending the ego, we lose ourselves completely? What if enlightenment is actually a kind of psychological death? What if we wake up and discover we never truly existed? But this death of the observer isn't the end. It's the beginning of something much deeper. It's the discovery that consciousness doesn't need an owner, that experience can happen without someone to control it. It's like discovering the ocean doesn't need individual waves to be an ocean. Waves are simply the ocean expressing its own nature. Similarly, our individuality is simply universal consciousness expressing itself through a particular perspective. Be yourself, say the personal development books. Live authentically, preach the motivational coaches. But what do we do when we discover that being truly authentic means becoming a stranger in our own world? When our inner truth conflicts completely with society's expectations around us? Being authentic can mean disappointing people we love, abandoning careers others consider successful, making choices that seem crazy to outsiders. It can mean admitting we don't know what we're doing, that we have deep fears, that sometimes we feel lost and confused. Imagine a classical musician who discovers their passion for jazz, but their family invested years in their formal training. Being authentic would be following their musical truth, even knowing this might seem like waste or rebellion to outside observers. Or like a successful engineer who dreams of opening a flower shop. Authenticity sometimes demands choices that defy all social logic. Real authenticity isn't an improved and more positive version of ourselves. It's the acceptance of all aspects of our humanity, including those we'd prefer to hide. It's recognizing our flaws, our contradictions, our shadow zones, and choosing to live with integrity anyway. But the price of authenticity can be high. We might find ourselves alone, misunderstood, judged by others. We might discover that many of our relationships were based on the false version of ourselves we presented to the world. And when we stop playing that role, some people simply disappear from our lives. It's an isolation that hurts, but that's necessary to find who we really are underneath all the masks. For years, we believed the next achievement would bring the satisfaction we were looking for. The next job, the next relationship, the next purchase, the next trip. We always lived in the future, always hoping something external would finally complete us. But then one day we get everything we wanted, and the emptiness is still there. It's a shocking revelation to realize that nothing in the external world can fill the inner hole. Not professional success, not social recognition, not perfect romantic love. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. No matter how much we pour in, it always remains empty. This realization can lead to despair. If not even our greatest achievements can give us the peace we seek, then what's left? Why keep trying, working, dreaming? Why wake up tomorrow if nothing we do really matters? But there's profound freedom in this realization. When we stop expecting the external world to save us, we can finally look inward. We can stop chasing carrots we'll never reach and begin to appreciate what's already here. We discover that the peace we were looking for was never lost. It was just obscured by our frantic search for it in places where it could never be. There's a point in the self-knowledge journey where we know too much to be innocent, but not enough to be wise. It's a psychological no man's land, where every action is analyzed, every motivation questioned, every impulse dissected until it loses all spontaneity. Imagine a musician who studied so much music theory, they can no longer play a note without analyzing its harmonic function, its relationship to the beat, its position in the scale. The music that once flowed naturally is now blocked by constant analysis. Every chord is questioned, every melody dissected, until the song loses its soul. We see through our own lies, recognize our neurotic patterns, identify our projections and defense mechanisms. But all this awareness can become paralyzing. How do we embrace someone when we know it might be to fill our emotional neediness? How do we compliment a friend when we realize there might be disguised envy? How do we make decisions when we see all the possible psychological traps? It's like trying to walk while analyzing every movement of our leg muscles, or like an actor who became so conscious of technique they lost the ability to simply live the character. Excessive awareness can steal life's naturalness, turn every moment into a psychological experiment, every relationship into behavioral analysis. We lose the capacity to simply be, to respond spontaneously, to live without constantly analyzing what we're living. Eventually, we realize that even this psychological hypervigilance is just another ego trap, a sophisticated attempt to maintain control through knowledge. True wisdom sometimes means knowing when to stop analyzing and simply dive into the experience. It means finding the balance between awareness and spontaneity, between knowledge and innocence. There's something irreversible about the awakening process. Once we see through illusions, we can no longer believe in them. Once we question the truths we were taught, we can no longer accept them blindly. It's as if we've eaten from the tree of knowledge and lost forever the possibility of living in the garden of blissful ignorance. Sometimes, we feel nostalgic for that time when things were simple, when we believed there were totally good people and others totally bad, when we were certain about what was right and wrong, when we trusted that authorities knew what they were doing. There was comforting security in that innocence. But we can't go back. We can't unlearn what we've learned, unsee what we've seen. We're like adults who can no longer believe in fairy tales with a child's pure faith. We gain in depth but lose in simplicity. We gain in wisdom but lose in certainty. This mourning is real and needs to be honored. It's natural to feel nostalgia for the time when answers were clear, purposes evident, identities solid. But we also need to recognize that the innocence we lost was partially made of ignorance, and the wisdom we gained, even if painful, allows us to live more authentically and compassionately. Growing up hurts, but it also liberates. Sartre wrote about this. That sensation of nausea that arises when we realize we exist without reason, without justification, without necessity. We're simply here, thrown into this world, forced to exist without having chosen it. It's a realization that can literally make us sick. It's like discovering you're a character in a video game that nobody's playing. You keep existing, but there's no programmed purpose, no main mission, no script to follow. You're simply there, processing data, reacting to stimuli, without any of this being planned or having importance to some cosmic player. Imagine waking up and realizing that everything, your family, your job, your dreams, your fears, is completely contingent. It could be different. It might not exist. There's nothing necessary or eternal about it. You yourself might not have been born, and the universe would continue exactly the same. Your existence is no more cosmically important than the existence of an ant or a stone. This perception of radical contingency can be overwhelming. Suddenly, all the things that seemed solid and important reveal their arbitrary nature. Why do we care so much about things that, from a cosmic perspective, are completely insignificant? Why do we suffer over problems that, in 100 years, no one will even remember? But even this existential nausea can be a portal. When we stop expecting our existence to be justified by something greater, we can begin to appreciate the absurd miracle of simply being here. If our life doesn't have a cosmic purpose, then we're free to create our own small purposes. If we're not universally special, we can be special to each other. The absence of transcendent meaning doesn't make life worthless. It makes each moment of connection, each gesture of love, each instant of beauty even more precious for being so improbable and fragile. One of the most confusing discoveries of the spiritual journey is realizing that emptiness and fullness sometimes look so similar, it's almost impossible to distinguish them. There are moments of deep quietude where we don't know if they're true peace or just emotional numbness. There are periods of detachment where we don't know if they're wisdom or disguised depression. When we stop reacting dramatically to life's ups and downs, when we stop identifying with our thoughts and emotions, a calm can arise that's unsettling. Is this enlightenment, or am I just dead inside? We ask ourselves. Is this serenity spiritual or pathological? The line between authentic awakening and emotional dissociation can be very thin. Both can produce a sensation of watching life from the outside, of not feeling completely present in our own emotions. Both can create a distance from personal drama that can be either liberating or alienating. The difference lies in the quality of presence. Dissociation is an escape. We run from life's intensity to a safe but sterile refuge. Authentic awakening is an embrace. We remain fully present even in the face of pain, but without completely identifying with it. One is premature death, the other is fuller life. But learning to distinguish between them is an art that requires time, honesty, and frequently help from others who've already walked this territory. For a while, we find refuge in spiritual traditions. They offer us maps tested by time, practices refined by generations, communities of seekers. There's something comforting about following a path that's been walked by millions of people throughout history. We feel part of something larger, wiser, more ancient. But then we begin to perceive the limitations. Dogmas that don't make sense for our individual experience. Cultural prejudices embedded in ancient traditions. The tendency of spiritual institutions to become rigid, hierarchical, controlling. The discovery that even the most venerated masters were flawed, human, sometimes hypocritical. This realization can be devastating. If not even sacred traditions can give us complete answers, if not even time-tested paths are infallible, then where do we find guidance? How do we distinguish between genuine wisdom and ancient superstition? How do we separate timeless insights from obsolete cultural conditioning? Eventually, we realize that traditions are tools, not final destinations. They're like vessels that help us cross the ocean, but that we eventually need to abandon when we reach the other shore. Real wisdom isn't in blindly following any tradition. but in extracting what's useful from each while maintaining our capacity to question, to discern, to think for ourselves. Traditions can inspire and guide us, but they can't do the inner work for us. There's a cruel irony in human consciousness. At the exact moment we begin to understand life, we realize it's ending. When we finally develop some wisdom, when we begin to see through the illusions that kept us busy for decades, we discover our time is limited. Each passing day is one day less to apply what we've learned. This awareness of mortality can transform every moment into anguishing pressure. Am I wasting my life? We ask ourselves. Should I be doing something more meaningful with the time I have left? Every choice becomes heavy with the awareness that it's one of the last we'll make. Paradoxically, the same awareness of finitude that can anguish us can also liberate us. When we realize our life is just a brief blink in the history of the universe, our daily worries lose much of their importance. If we're going to die anyway, why not be brave? Why not love intensely? Why not live with passion? Death, seen up close, becomes a wise counselor. It teaches us what really matters and what's just noise. It shows us that time is the most precious resource we have, not to be wasted on old resentments or future worries, but to be lived fully in the only moment that really exists, now. Some doors once opened cannot be closed again. Some truths once seen cannot be forgotten. There are moments in the self-knowledge journey when we look back with nostalgia, wishing we could return to the simplicity of before, but discover that path is permanently blocked. It's like trying to become a child again after growing up. We can imitate innocence, pretend we don't know what we know, but deep down, we'll always carry the mark of experience. Once we question our fundamental beliefs, we can never again believe in them with the same blind faith. Once we see through social masks, we can never again participate in social theater with the same naturalness. Sometimes, this can seem like a curse. We see other people living their lives with a simplicity we envy, worried about things that seem trivial to us, happy with explanations that sound empty to us. Why can't we be like them? Why were we cursed with this compulsive need to question, to deepen, to seek? But eventually we realized that even if we could go back, we wouldn't want to. Because along with complexity and uncertainty, we also gained depth of experience, a capacity for compassion, an appreciation for the beauty and fragility of existence that makes life infinitely richer. We lost innocence, but gained wisdom. And this trade, however painful, is worth it. Perhaps one of the most devastating realizations is the apparent indifference of the universe to our personal suffering. We cry out for answers and receive silence. We beg for signs and find only coincidences. We ask for purpose and discover only the indifferent vastness of the cosmos. The stars keep shining while we cry. The sun rises every morning regardless of whether we're happy or desperate. Nature follows its eternal cycles without caring about our small human tragedies. It's like shouting in a canyon and realizing that even the echo eventually gets lost in the void. This cosmic indifference can make us feel infinitely small and insignificant. If the universe doesn't care about us, if our pain doesn't move mountains or stars, then what's the point of anything we do? Why care if nothing and no one cares about us? But there's strange freedom in this indifference. If the cosmos has no expectations of us, then we're free to create our own values. If there's no cosmic judge evaluating us, then we can stop trying to impress the universe and start living for ourselves and those we love. The silence of the cosmos isn't rejection. It's an invitation to find our own voice. And then, after years of searching, of struggle, of resistance, we reach a point of total exhaustion. There's no more energy to fight against reality, to try to force the world to make sense, to insist there must be answers to all questions. It's the moment of final capitulation, not as defeat, but as a strange form of victory. It's like a programmer who spent months trying to force code to work, fighting bugs, rewriting line by line, until one day they simply stop, take a deep breath, and accept that maybe the problem isn't in the code, but in their entire approach. Or like someone who spent years trying to assemble furniture with the wrong instructions, insisting they should be able to make the pieces fit, until realizing they were looking at the manual upside down the whole time. This surrender isn't passive or defeatist. It's an active recognition that our resistance to the mystery of existence was causing us more suffering than the mystery itself. It's like stopping rowing against a current and discovering that if we let ourselves be carried, the water takes us to a place even more beautiful than the one we were trying to reach. Imagine a child trying to hold water in closed hands. The tighter they squeeze, the more it spills through their fingers. But when they finally open their palms, the water can rest there, crystalline and serene. Our desperate search for control and understanding was like those closed fists. Surrender is opening our hands. In capitulation, we discover a peace that doesn't depend on understanding everything, a joy that needs no justification, a love that exists regardless of being reciprocated. We stop demanding that life be different from what it is and begin to dance with it as it is. Chaotic, mysterious, sometimes cruel, sometimes magnificently beautiful. This is the wisdom that Alan Watts spent decades trying to transmit to us, that resistance to what is creates suffering. When we finally stop fighting against the current of existence, we discover it naturally carries us to where we need to be. It's not passive resignation, it's active participation in the flow of life, like a surfer who doesn't fight the waves, but dances with them. This acceptance doesn't mean resignation or passivity in the face of injustice. It means recognizing we can act with compassion and courage, even when we don't completely understand why we're here. We can love even knowing everything is impermanent. We can find meaning even knowing it might just be our own creation. And this, we discover, is more than enough. At the end of this journey through the shadows of the search for meaning, we discover that darkness wasn't our destination, but our teacher. Each void faced, each illusion undone, each certainty lost, brought us closer to a simple truth. We're capable of living fully, even in the face of mystery. The path through the dark side of the spiritual search isn't easy, but it's necessary. Only by crossing these barren lands do we reach an oasis of genuine peace, a peace that doesn't depend on answers, but on our infinite capacity to embrace questions with an open heart.